guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking it back to where it all started, Orcs and Goblins. And sticking with the trend of videos we've been doing recently, we're going to look at some individual profiles of the composition of the Orcs and Goblin army. Starting with Orc war bosses and big bosses. Orcs are led by the biggest and brawniest of their kind. These hulking individuals have pummeled their way to the top in a culture where only the strongest survive. Orc leaders do not rise above the knockdown brawls so common amongst their kind. They thrive on them, at least until they are toppled by a still mightier challenger. Having established dominance over all competitors, Orc leaders take control of a mob, or, if they are strong enough, an entire tribe. Any who question the right of the leader to rule must be slain, driven off, or spectacularly beaten into submission. The most powerful leaders are known as war bosses, though any number of violent activities, major victories, or well-known domains are layered into the commander's title, such as Chief Headtaker, Skull Crumpa of Dastuntes, or Grand Ruler of Spike Peak. Longer titles are favored, and the number of bragging rights an Orc warboss has accumulated can be used to gauge his power level. Such credentials can be slightly exaggerated. He stacked dead stunties to the sky, but are never without basis in fact. Orcs seldom bluff, possibly because they are a bit dim, but more probably because it never occurs to them. They simply don't understand the concept of trying to get someone to back down. Surely the point of such grandiose titles is to draw the challengers to you. Orc war bosses often go to great lengths to flaunt their dominance, which has led to some extravagant exhibitions. Back banners and trophy displays of enemy skulls are not uncommon. Black Orc leaders, being militaristic and dour like all of their kind, favor wearing a remarkable set of horns upon their helmets, or wielding the largest battle axe imaginable. Savage Orc war bosses are typically even more overt, often bearing the most impressive war paint, or taking the tribal customs, such as odd body piercings or wearing top knots, to the most extreme level. Some war bosses prefer to lead their troops from atop an impressive mount befitting their high status. This could be a chariot, a particularly large and ferocious war boar, or even one of the highly prized serpentine wyverns. War bosses form a focal point for the Greenskin army, as only a tribe's leader can call Dawa, the deep-throated roar that causes all Orcs to scream at the top of their lungs as they surge towards the foe in a tidal wave of violence and destruction. The best leaders know instinctively when to call for such an ultimate outburst of brutal energy, timing it to ensure the collapse and slaughter of any who dare stand in the way of the greenskin horde. Orc Shamans. An Orc Shaman is a living conduit to Gork and Mork, and can wield such arcane might that even the crustiest old war bosses have to be impressed. The power of a shaman comes not just from the winds of magic, or the great green as greenskins know it, but also from the raw energy radiated by their fellow orcs. As they advance into battle, the Wa energy rises, allowing a shaman to focus that force through the power of his mind. What erupts out of the shaman are spells as brutal as the orcs themselves. Shamans have been known to cause a foe's brains to burst out of his skull, to shoot death beams out of their own beady eyes, or to summon an almighty green foot from the skies to stomp and squish any unfortunate enough to be underneath. By using the awesome powers of green skin magic to destroy an enemy, orc shamans earn the right to their eccentricities. While an orc shaman can mystically squash a foe in a variety of ways that make greenskins cheer, he is at times unable to attend to his own bodily needs. It is as if being so close to the powers of the greenskin gods is enough to unhinge a shaman's mind. Inarguably, shamans are a bit mad, being prone to trances and sudden spasms of fitful dancing. This embarrassing behavior can cause scenes around the camp and are awkward at best. Orcs typically look the other way during such moments, and many black orcs refuse to even acknowledge a shaman's presence. It is hard to ignore the kind of hooting and arm-waving employed by an orc shaman, but the battle-hardened, no-nonsense green-skinned warriors go to great lengths to do so. The sight of a shaman hopping about a disgruntled and frankly disgusted war boss is not unusual. Such wayward actions are naturally upsetting to a race that solves its problems with the application of swift and severe violence. But all orcs know it is bad luck and dangerous to kick a shaman. It isn't that a shaman might leak green lightning bolts from his eyes, although that does happen. It is more that the superstitious greenskins are sure that Gork and Mork are watching. It is best not to abuse the favored of the gods, and so the shaman's outlandish behavior is tolerated with a rare and unusual patience. Woe to any goblin caught smirking at such buffoonery, however, for orcs have free rein to kick them both hard and far. The superstitious savage orcs observe even more rituals and put up with even more bone-rattling, feather-waving dances by their mumbo-jumbo chanting shaman. As the shamans provide the magical war paint that protects them, such activities are generally accepted. If there is any kind of chance that the magic juju will work, the savage orcs will put up with any amount of shamanistic prancing. Slaughter at Grimspike Pass. From the Karakazul Book of Grudges, 23:15. Engorged with magical power, the shaman gestured and our Longbeards fell. At its beckoning screech, the feet of some foul greenskin god descended, grinding 100 ironbreakers to death. With each incantation, the shaman's power grew, until its eyes sparkled with hate and malice. Then, with a crash akin to 1,000 cannons sounding, the shaman exploded. The detonation caused the ancient walls of the past to topple and fall, crushing all beneath them. For 10,000 kindred dead, we swear vengeance against Grimspike Pass. No peace until the mountain is mined to exhaustion, and the rocks of the past are as dust. Orcs. Orcs, often known as Orc Boys or just Da Boys, are the hard-fighting infantry found at the heart of most green-skinned tribes. Goblins are more prolific, but it is the orcs that do the bulk of the bloody work in most battles. That is okay with all parties, as orcs are a warrior race, and there is nothing they like half as much as a good scrap. In fact, it is hard to get orcs to stop fighting. They are an overly pugnacious lot, and if no one else is around, they will pummel each other just to keep their spirits up. Luckily, orcs do not register pain as do other races. A typical green-skinned lout won't let a minor injury, such as a severed limb, keep him from fighting. Orcs are so tough and resilient that if the arm can be found and sewn back on, however crudely, it will heal quickly. Orcs naturally take their robust physique for granted and regard everyone else as weak, puny, or squishy. Orcs form up into units called mobs, which are led by the biggest of their kind, the bosses. On the battlefield, orc mobs are distinguished by their own symbols or markings, which are most often displayed on shields, banners, or totems. It is common practice to brag about one's own mob, we is the best, while rudely scoffing at other mobs. Gruddick's boys are trickle-legged pansies. Naturally, this leads to punch-ups, scrums, and actual combat, which is what the orcs wanted all along. Mobs carry a range of weapons, long-staved spears, a variety of bladed cleavers, or occasionally looted items. These weapons often feature prominently in a mob's name, such as the Rusty Choppa Boys or Gutnick's Jabbers. All orc weapons are called choppas, and they are kept in a battered condition. If it isn't already splattered with blood, it soon will be. To an orc, an untarnished weapon is a sure sign that a fight is overdue. Before battle, the orc boys chant and stomp the ground, building up to a wild crescendo of utter violence. Weapons and shields are clashed together into a growing din. Unable to wait for the enemy, fights break out between individuals or rival mobs as taunts and rocks are flung back and forth. When their leader roars his wah, orcs respond in kind, using their guttural voices to join in the swelling, barbaric battle cry. It is a release of battle fury, and a call for all-out war that sweeps the orc boys into a joyous tide of violence. Our boys. Some orcs carry bows. These orcs, known as our boys, are viewed suspiciously by the rest of the boys, for archery is a bit goblin-y. As our boys can prove their prowess in combat, such oddities can be overlooked. Still, it is best not to camp next to our boys, as a hail of arrows periodically pincushions passers-by. Yelling rude names at our boys is a proven way to alleviate camp boredom and the start of many a good ruckus. Our boy bosses are notorious dead-eye shots that often order their mob to keep shooting corpses long after their foes have fallen, as it's good practice. Biggins. In many tribes, the largest orcs band together into a mob that is accurately, if not imaginatively, called the Biggins. These warriors are bigger, stronger, and even fightier than regular orc boys. Those that survive their stint with the Biggins often go on to become bosses, big bosses, or even war bosses. In the meantime, they form an elite unit that gains the reputation for being the hardest-hitting mob in the tribe, and claim they are only too eager to show off to any foes or rivals that get in their way. Only one mob can be the best, so Biggins are mercifully rare in each greenskin tribe. Something, just sort of as an aside, I think is really interesting about orcs is that their archers are just as fighty as their rank and file guys. They're more expensive, obviously, and they have less options for, in fact, they have no options for equipment. You get light armor and a bow. But I think that's, I don't know, I think that's kind of cool. It's not every army that's like that. Anyways. Orc boar boys. The war boar is a stubborn and vicious animal that stands nearly as tall as a horse and is considerably bulkier. It is an extremely tough beast that is notoriously bad-tempered, loudly flatulent, wholly dangerous, and unpredictable. These are just the sort of qualities that orcs greatly admire, so it was only natural for them to adopt war boars as their mounts. When the beasts lower their tusks and charge, the orc boar boys will crack open an enemy battle line as easily as a well-placed chop-up blow can tear apart a foe's ribcage. Not every orc that attempts to ride one of these truculent beasts succeeds. War boars are well known for their violent attacks against any who try to mount their hairy backs. From the front, a boar's tusks can gore, while from the rear the creature's short but powerful legs can deliver crippling kicks. Once a war boar has a victim on the ground, it's time for a good trampling, and many a potential orc rider has ended up flattened in the mud. While it is impressive how far entrails can be squished outwards by the angry stomping of a boar, it is the creature's thunderous charge that is truly special. The first sign that such a spectacle is about to occur is when the enraged boar retreats a good distance from its stunned victim, turns around and scrapes the ground with its iron-hard hooves. When the boar lowers its snout and begins to run, even the most raucous orcs hush in anticipation. It takes some distance to build up speed, but eventually the boar's churning legs get the beast moving at a rate wholly unexpected from such a lumpen mass. The ground shakes with each thumping stride, and the impact of the boar charge shatters bones and sends its victim, or at least parts of him, dozens of feet into the air. The constant danger presented by their own mounts ensures that only the most daring orcs succeed in becoming boar boys. In battle, mobs of orc boar boys fulfill the role of heavy cavalry, able to shrug off hails of missile fire and bring home mauling charges. Boar boys are a rugged lot, bearing even more scars than their foot-slogging mates. Many of these old wounds are from their life of battle, yet no few come from their own mounts. Boar boys take great delight in showing off their impressive injuries. It is said by some goblins that, with their long tusks and unintelligent but beady eyes, many war boars have grown to look, or even smell, remarkably like their orc riders. However, this might be an empty compliment, intended only to curry favor with the powerful and influential boar boys. Most boar boys mobs have colorful titles: Dot Tuskers, Snortin' Rekkas, Line Smashes, and so on. Many bear crude boar imagery on their banners and shields, depicting tusked skulls, bloody hooves, and the like. When not carried in battle, such gear of war hangs atop the stockade pens that enclose the war boars. It is common practice to stack any trophies, like severed heads or enemy banners, around the boar enclosure as well. Boar boys take advantage of their elite status, lording it over all other greenskins, save leaders and black orcs. It is natural in some tribes for a mob of boar boys to develop into biggins. The combination of especially large and powerful orcs atop war boars makes for even more devastating charges and, not surprisingly, even greater swagger and bravado around the greenskin camp. Orc boar chariots. By lashing together roughly hewn logs, orcs are able to construct formidable chariots. It takes two powerful war boars to pull such a blocky construction, and, at first, even these thickly muscled beasts struggle. With some grunting, and not just a little straining flatulence, the boars finally get the crude wheels rolling. Once the churning porcine legs have the chariot rumbling along at full tilt, it becomes an impressive shock weapon, capable of slamming into a foe with the force of a thunderbolt, albeit a hairy and stinky one. If the sheer impact of such a hurtling force does not smash the enemy, there are always the iron-shod wheels with crude blades attached. The goring tusks of the boars, or the spear thrusts of the orc crew themselves. While not as fast as a wolf-drawn goblin chariot, the heavier orc vehicles hits harder, and in return can absorb considerably more punishment than the more flimsy gobbo-crude devices. Many orcs vie for the prestigious right to ride in a chariot. To stand astride its wooden planks is a sign of superiority over the foot-slogging infantrymen, and an advantage over the boar boys. After all, boar boys are closer to their irascible mounts and more likely to get gored. To further show off, many orc chariot crew decorate their ride by strapping on large banners, flashy streamers, and bloody trophies, goodies plucked from the chariot's victims, often bearing distinctive wheel or hoof marks. It is popular for a crew to drive their chariot around an orc camp, rumbling at breakneck speed. Other orcs take great delight in cheering at the show-offs and typically throw things at the passing chariots, hurling rocks or even the smaller members of their mob. The chariot crew's non-stop need to show off their set of wheels often results in more than the usual number of scraps. As the orc charioteers spar with the rest of the Boyz, it is really just another excuse for a good punch-up, which is why orcs always cheer loudly when chariots pull into camp. Due to their hitting power, most war bosses desire a boar chariot or two for their force. Some savage orc tribes have attempted to make chariots as well, although their square-wheeled attempts have yet to replicate any of the bloody success that more civilized orcs have achieved. There are a few tribes that are known to make even greater use of such deadly battle carts. The bone rattlers mount most of their boys in ramshackle chariots, raising a cloud of dust as they cross the Badlands. True to their name, the bone rattlers string the well-gnawed bones of their victims onto the contraptions, producing an almighty rattling noise as the army marches. "Here now, what do you think you're doing?" bellowed the Black Orc boss. Furtive goblin faces turned round and flinched instinctively. "Nothing, boss. Just having a bit of grub is all," whispered the bravest of the goblinoids. "Don't give me that. You're up to something," towering orc looked round suspiciously. Where's Ratgash? You haven't met him? There was a stunned silence.
Ed Ratgash, the goblin sounded hurt. Ed Ratgash, that's disgusting, boss. He's one of us lads. Besides, he's all grease and gristle. Give us all indigestion, he would.
Then who's this then? The black orc demanded, pointing a damning claw towards the meal. And none of your lies, or I'll give you something a whole lot worse than indigestion.
Get up, boss. One of Maggot's lot, but he was dead when we found him.
The goblin paused a moment.
Course, he claimed he was just sleeping. But that lot is liars, ain't they?
The goblins all nodded reassuringly on this point. Carry on then, pronounced the boss, and you'll save me a leg if you know what's good for you. And with that embarrassing attempt at Cockney greenskin accents, we're going to bring this video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.